Hello, my name is Olorotimi Osha. Today is August the 21st, 2026. Today I want to talk about the list that was released last month by the Department of Homeland Security. It's within the Department of Homeland Security that the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service is under. So for people who don't know, USCIS, that's it used to be called INS, right? Immigrate INS when I came to America in the 90s, and right, it used to be called INS, and so they're USCIS now, but they're under the Department of Homeland Security. It's under the Department of Homeland Security that ICE is under, right? Immigration and Custom Enforcement. ICE, they're the ones who've been raiding undocumented people, people in deportation, removal proceedings, and deporting them. So last month, the Department of Homeland Security released a list of the worst of the worst, right? The worst of the worst criminals in America that it's deporting, and it was a list of 124 Nigerian nationals, right? And so, of course, the Nigerian government, they reacted appropriately, saying, well, okay, these people have been called worst of the worst. That's hopefully that their due process rights will be respected, their dignity as individuals. They're still human beings. They're human rights laws that we have, that it should be respected. And of course, because I did international human rights law at University of Oxford in the United Kingdom, of course, this is important for me. And also, I did a lot of international human rights stuff because I studied at Bocconi University in Milan, in Italy as well. So a lot of the courses I did also had to do with the respect of ECHR, that's European Commission, on the human rights, and Europe really focuses on that dignity and respect of human rights, right? And of course, I have a Juris Doctor, that's Doctor of Law degree from George Washington University, and all of these things, due process is very important. First of all, let me also mention that I don't subscribe to crime at all. My friends who've known me from childhood know that I'm somebody who is very against crime, against criminals. I think people should be brought to account. If they commit, they do the crime, they should pay for it. But being somebody who has been wrongfully accused, right? I'm still going through the process. That's why I've been doing these videos, right? I've done videos explaining how I was in my home, not committing a crime, living alone, right? Just alone, and I was swatted. I've done videos explaining a swatting, when somebody makes a false accusation that there's a crime going on in someone's home. I was raided by 40 cops. They disguised the reality. A man called Jide Wari, Howard University professor, had gone to fabricate an emergency evaluation petition, telling lies, saying I threatened to shoot him, all sorts of stuff, just telling lies. Eventually, I was shot in the head by the police, right? I was raided, falsely imprisoned. The police had no arrest warrant, so there are laws that protect me. So immediately they made me offers, because a plea bargain. I refused it, and I know how the legal process in America, because I've experienced it. It's not what I learned in law school, because you learn the law and to respect the law, and the law there's the integrity of the legal system, at least in America. But when you go through the legal process, the first time that I'd ever been charged with anything, ironically, the police officer who shot me in the head, the police officers who tased me, all three of them, who had guns, I had no gun, nothing, right? I'm entitled to self-defense in my home, by the way, right? Especially if the police don't even have an arrest warrant, they don't give me notice, nothing, especially if it's they came to my home based on a fabricated emergency evaluation petition by a perjurer that they don't give me any notice for, that was obtained ex parte, right? These are complex things that I've explained before. So wrongly accused, eventually I went to trial, right? I had no attorney, right? I was working in the federal government Department of the Navy as an auditor. I got a new position in intelligence at the Pentagon. Previous judge, took my job, prevented me from going to work, right? Because he placed me under house arrest for a long time. and all on fabrications. They know they fabricated this thing against me, but they're just trying to pressure me to prevent a lawsuit, because I have a lawsuit against them. So this is a malicious prosecution. Now, it's one thing to charge someone with a crime, with a false crime. It's another thing to discover that you can actually be convicted on something that you haven't, on a crime you never committed, that the state attorney knows you didn't commit, that the police officers who are acting as witnesses know you didn't commit, that the judge manipulating and steering the jurors know you didn't commit, but the jurors go ahead and convict you, right? So that's the situation where I am. Me, it's misdemeanor, nothing serious. Intent to frighten the police officer who shot me in the head. So the fact that I know it can happen, because they offered me a plea. There was a psychiatrist. They asked me, oh, if you go to a mental health evaluation and take treatment, we'll dismiss the charges. They offered me, oh, if you say you go back to Nigeria, never come back, we'll dismiss the charges. I said, never, that's never going to happen, because I was sitting in my home. I haven't committed any crime. You brought all these lies. They even brought lies in court. A fabricated ex post facto arrest warrant saying I was, on that day, May 16, 2023, that the reason police came to my home was because I was threatening to kill my wife in my home. I don't have a wife. I didn't have a wife. I have an ex-wife. There was never any violence between us. Police was never called in my marriage. Never, not one day in the 7 years we were together. Not one day did I ever touch my wife. I've been divorced from her almost 15 years. I've never heard from her, never seen her. She lives in another state. I don't even know what's going on with her. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know. I don't care. I don't know what's up with her. No contact, no relationship. So they just fabricated stuff just to get a judge to give a false arrest warrant. So I could see it. They never showed me. It was the first time I ever saw this in court. So that's exculpatory evidence that the police fabricated everything, but a jury can convict you. So it's with that in mind, because ironically, it was just a few days in the month that I was raided, right, by this Howard University police officers, false allegations and perjured emergency evaluation. That's Jide Warrior. Now, Nigerians will get you in trouble in America. That's another thing I want to tell you. There's a certain group of Nigerians that will get you in trouble. I just received a tentative offer for the best job in that May. I've talked about it, as to be director of financial crimes. They had just mapped my whole career for me. It was amazing, unbelievable, right? Fantastic base salary, $250,000. I told this guy, Jide, after this, during the proceedings, right, after I was locked up, the Pentagon gave me another job, 6 figures again, subject matter expert, right? So we can see how I came to see that they're crooked judges in America. They pay them because judges have absolute immunity. It's difficult to investigate a judge, and they have a racket, right? They have a racket. It's not just them, unless the FBI decides, the Department of Justice decides to go all out, right? And it's rare, right? So they have a racket, and so it's with this in mind, and something else that happened just a few days before the wrongful assault on me in May 2016. My good friend that I've known, a friend I've known since my teenage years, he's here in America as well. He was telling me about another Nigerian in Texas who had a stellar profile, went to Harvard, graduated from MIT, graduated from Harvard, and he was he was convicted and imprisoned, but for real estate, right, for doing mortgage fraud. And my friend was saying, look, this guy has been framed. And it's ironic if you believe in juju, karma, because he was saying, look, and I was saying, no, the system can't frame you. One day, over 25 years ago, I remember there was a friend, he's late now, and he said something when I was saying, oh, America is great, because I'd graduated from Troy, I'd done well, I'd worked, I was working at the bank, and he was telling me then that, look, you keep saying America is a great country, America is good, America is a great country. You will know that there's no equality in this country the day you are in conflict with a white man who wants something that you have. A white woman, a white person, that was what he said, white person who wants something you have and you're in conflict with them. That's when you know America is not equal. That's when you know. He told me this 25 years ago. Right? Yeah, I'm not just at least over 20 years because I just graduated. I just got my first job, post graduation at a bank. I was working at a bank, and he told me this. This was a friend of mine back then, that when you're in conflict with a white person, right? And he told me about this situation of this Nigerian guy who was successful, and he had a business and he had a contract. He received government contracts and things like that. And there was a white guy who wanted this contract as well. And the Nigerian guy won this thing fair and square. And the white guy now started pushing buttons with federal government, with different agencies, different people, investigators, everybody to start investigating this guy. That, in DC, J. Edgar Hoover, he was the first director of the FBI. His philosophy was everybody has something a skeleton in their closet, and you just have to find it. So he had something dirty on everybody. That's Edgar Hoover, the longest FBI director, right? Almost 50 years or so. That everybody has something bad. So it's very cynical. And so even people who are clean, they look for ways, they'll get people to ensnare them, to entrap them, whether it's women, so they can just use it against you in future, right? And so with that mindset, because this was in Washington, D.C., that this Nigerian man who won this contract from the government, and they started investigating everything about it, and then eventually they found something. I don't support anybody committing crime or hiding previous crime or anything like that, right? But fortunately, I'm not that sort of person. I'm clean as a whistle, right? So, but what this guy was telling me. People make mistakes, and I'm not judgmental. There are people who've probably made mistakes in their past or whatever, but being targeted, right? Using the legal system, American legal system, to target Nigerians who are successful, it's atrocious, it's outrageous. And bear that in mind, that sometimes this happens. And this was what my friend was telling me in May 2023 as well, about this Nigerian who was successful in Texas, and he got into real estate business and things like that, and that he was now convicted of mortgage fraud. I don't support it. Despite his Harvard credentials, he graduated, did a master's at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He had a degree from MIT, famous MIT, right? So despite that, in fact, if you go to the fact that you have such elite credentials, elite background, the more reason you shouldn't be involved in crime. But again, you're innocent until proven guilty. But this is a case of, my friend was saying, look, there are instances where the state, the government, agencies within the U.S., not agencies within the U.S. federal government, but certain racist states in the South are fabricating, and cops, they're fabricating false charges against Nigerians. I dismissed that. I didn't believe that. I said that was false until it happened to me. In my case, it's misdemeanors, but I've seen that, right? And I've seen how a jury can be rigged, can be steered, how a judge can be corrupt, can be bribed. It happens in America. So this list of Nigerians, worst of the worst that's been released, take it with a grain of salt. Are there Nigerians who commit crime? Yes, like every other nationality. But everybody is entitled to due process, right? And we're finding an egregious cases in America where due process is being violated. My due process rights have been egregiously violated, despite the fact that I'm trained in the law, right? I'm trained in U.S. law in one of the best schools. For federal government laws, I think if they said George Washington University was the best, I wouldn't be surprised. J. Edgar Hoover, that I just mentioned, he graduated from George Washington University, right? A lot of those FBI people, State Department, GW is the #1 feeder school for them, right? The FBI, the Department of Justice, and things like that. You see George Washington University people, right? The longest serving CIA director, Alan Dulles, went to George Washington University Law School, my law school. His brother, who was Secretary of State, Foster Dulles, graduated from my law school as well, George Washington University Law School. So I'm trained in this thing. That's another reason why I want to discuss these matters, right? I'm trained in it, right? I did forensic science in law school. I was very fortunate that the former director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, it's within the Department of Justice. He was my professor, right? There's a guy who's named Professor Kenneth Melson. He taught me forensic science. There's another person, Professor Dr. Victor Whedon. He's the it was my professor as well. Both of them taught us forensic science. They had the CIA, FBI, different people to come and train us, right? People from the postal office. So I'm trained in this forensic science, how to gather evidence for a case, right? So, and of course, I was an auditor in the Department of the Navy. The federal government trained me extensively on auditing. And of course, I was a banker with Bank of America, Wachovia Securities, now called Wells Fargo, part of Wells Fargo, different banks, PNC Bank. I was a banker, well trained, exceptionally trained. I worked at Freddie Mac as a finance analyst, right, and an auditor. So I'm trained in following money, the paper trail, and of course in law, forensic science as well. And as an accountant, so I can explain. The reason why I'm saying all of this is I want to try and unpack what's going on in a specific case. So unfortunately, I saw on the list, because, like Nigerians here who are curious, I saw the list, and I like to watch Nigerian news channels. And unfortunately, one of the pictures that was paraded on those Nigerian news channels was someone I recognized, and I went to verify, and I saw it. Someone who went to school with me in Troy, Alabama. Her name is already out there, so I might as well say who it is. But anyway, we went to the same school in Troy, Alabama, and I was stunned. We just didn't go to the same school. At Troy, Alabama, I went there from 1999, and we not only went there together, but when she just arrived, because I'd been there a little bit earlier than her, and I had a car. So Troy didn't have public transportation, right? It's rural, right? It's an idyllic setting in Alabama, in Troy, very beautiful, picturesque town. But the problem back then, I don't know how it is now, but back then there was no transportation system. Everybody needed a car, right? You needed a car, and there wasn't a shuttle to move us around. And Nigerians who came anyway, they like to go shopping regularly, and so I would offer them, and I would drive them, take them grocery shopping. If they had something they wanted to do, I'd take them, I'd drive them around for free. I didn't charge them. And so that's me. Other people charge people for these things, but I never charged. I did these things for free. I'd come from Nigeria. Again, I'm a Christian. And so I did these things for free. Not just Nigerians, the Chinese students. So that's how I was very friendly with the Chinese students, with Chinese students. I do it for the Kenyans, Ugandans. I didn't discriminate. People from Tanzania, I would take them around in my car for free, take them grocery shopping, take them wherever they wanted to do, wherever they wanted to go, despite my own busy schedule as a student and somebody who worked as well. So I had a very busy schedule as a full-time student, and I helped them. And this person, her name's Oluyemisi Okedoko, right? She's one of the people that I helped, right? And my impression then was that she was serious, because if she had questions about education, I think she was taking a course I'd taken before, and she was in undergrad, and she would ask me questions, invite me, tell me, oh, okay, I should explain this to her. So she was serious. She was serious, and of course she liked the fact that I was into my studies, and so she struck me as someone who also had dignity, who was proud, wouldn't get involved in crime, because she told me she came from an upper class family. Her dad was a general or something in the Air Force and a medical doctor. So that's a big deal, that she came from a prestigious family in Nigeria. So people who come from a prestigious family in Nigeria, the reputation of their family is very important. So they're not going to do things that's going to embarrass their families, right? My dad was a bank chairman and bank CEO in Nigeria. People knew my dad, he's late, right? And my dad was late Chief Obafemi Awolowo's assistant and speechwriter. So people know my father, not just my father, I have uncles who are similarly very important, CEOs, founders and CEOs of investment banks. I have uncles that are professors, heads of deans of departments in universities. My brother's a professor, so people like that, people still in government. So our reputation is very important. And this was how this girl, this lady, she's a lady now. This was how she struck me, right? Of course, I graduated from Troy. She left Troy. I never was in touch with her. I don't know what happened to her. I don't know anything about her life. And, I have a very good memory, despite the fact that I've been shot in the head by Montgomery County police officers, right? But I thank God. So I was surprised. I saw her name. I remembered her. And she'd been to prison. She'd spent several years in prison now. And I went to look at her case and I researched her case. And of course, she's on the list of the 124 worst of the worst Nigerians. So I got interested. I investigated. I went to read her case. Her case is very complex. And that's a reason why I also gave that heads up about my background, of course, in law and of course in auditing, in forensic accounting, in forensic auditing, in money transfers as a stockbroker and as a banker. So I understand the trails and things like that. By the way, I also did bankruptcy. So in law school, right, I did bankruptcy and reorganization. So these are complex matters. Her case is very complex. I'm going to continue the story, but let me just start off with a primer. So I've talked about her background, and so doesn't seem to have the background of somebody who'd go into fraud. But people change, and I don't know what happened. So I went and I saw her situation. So apparently she'd been married to a man, another Nigerian man, but he has an American name, by the name of Felix Amos. Felix Amos, in 2018, he was convicted. He pled guilty to healthcare fraud, right? Defrauding the government of about $21 million in healthcare fraud. And he was in business with his wife, and his wife is 31 years younger than him. That's Oluyemisi Okedoku, right? Not that matters, right? But she was a very beautiful woman when she was young, very pretty, right? So who knows, right? So wealthy guy, Nigeria. So I was still studying, trying to see what happened. So he's supposed to be a businessman, very wealthy, owns multi-million, lived in a mansion of $3.5 million in Texas, right? $3.5 million, that's a lot, right? A lot of money, that's a mansion. And his business partner is his wife. So this man, Felix Amos, a Nigerian man, right, by the way, 72-year-old, he pleads guilty to healthcare fraud. He owns a number of healthcare providing agencies, right? And apparently he was defrauding the government of Medicare fraud and billing and paying physicians to certify patients who didn't exist, who didn't need services, right? Who were in prison or who were dead. And he was collecting payments from the government for Medicare on behalf of these people who were either in prison or were dead, and there were doctors who were certifying them, right? So again, I've done videos. It's kind of interesting because part of my situation, right, was I said there's a judge involved in Medicare fraud, Jide Wariri. These people, they're involved in Medicaid. It's Medicaid when it's a young person, and of course I reported it to the Department of Justice, right? So they've been involved in this kind of, because so it's complex, but let me focus so you can see why this case is sort of interesting to me, apart from the fact that I once knew the person, right? I once knew the person, and I know the person came, well, from what she told me, I didn't verify if the family she said she came from was really the family she said she came from. I don't know, but this was what she told me back then. But because of the complexity of the legal proceedings, because it involves bankruptcy, mortgage fraud, it involves a lawyer, crooked attorney, and I'm going to get into all of that. I'm going to have to do another video to continue because it's getting to be 30 minutes, right? And of course, the same healthcare fraud that's rampant, it's pervasive in America right now. And so he pleaded guilty and he got 30 months in prison. That's another thing that I found atrocious, right? The principal, the architect of this whole healthcare fraud, who the principal of the businesses that was defrauding the government of Medicare fraud, right? $21 million is what they said was defrauded, right, by these businesses. They're ongoing businesses, by the way, right? The principal got just 30 months in prison, 30 months. Now, his wife, who's his business partner, is Oluyemisi Okedokun, the person I met. We went to the same school in Troy University in Troy, Alabama together. She gets she gets more than him, right? She gets 72 months. She pled guilty in 2018. She got 72 months in prison. That's roughly 6 years, right? She pled guilty. She got 6 years. Ironically, so she got more time than her husband, who's the principal, the chief architect, right, of the whole fraud schemes. Then their office manager, another Nigerian woman named Fausat Adekunle. Ironically, her defense was like, look, she was just an office manager. She's doing what her boss is telling her to do. She's not aware of any scam. But as an office manager, obviously you sign the checks. When I first came to America, right, one of the places I did my internship was as a bookkeeper. So as an accountant, I was also the assistant to the president and owner of the company. His brother-in-law was the mayor of Troy, and he came from a wealthy family. They were a wealthy family. He had 70 acres of land. He actually had me live on his premises at one time, right, to help me defray my school expenses, right, my expenses. So he had 70 acres of land. He had a farm. He had an auto body shop and a car dealership. He had all these businesses, right? And so he hired me as his assistant, right? And so I learned hands-on business practically, right away. And I was the bookkeeper. I wrote the checks, right? I wrote the checks, all of that, but he signed it. So that's segregation of duties, right? To make sure that one person isn't stealing. But imagine if he had actually been a scam artist, if he had been defrauding people, and they say because I'm the one writing the checks, therefore I'm involved as well. I'm an employee. I have no idea what he's doing, right? Fortunately, I'm not saying that's what my boss was doing. Fortunately, my boss, from all intents and purposes, was clean and everything, was doing legitimate business because it was just a car dealership. He had a car dealership. He had a auto body shop. He had a farm. He had different things, right? So legit business. But my job, I'm writing the checks. Doesn't mean I'm involved in any way anything going on behind. So it wasn't a shady business anyway. But I'm just giving an example. So their office manager, Fausat Adekunle, a Nigerian woman, Yoruba, right? Unfortunately, she's saying she's just the office manager. She's writing the checks because that's her job, right? That's her job. But it doesn't mean she's behind the scam, the fraud that they're doing, or the misconduct, the things they're doing behind, that are criminal, right? And unfortunately for her, the jury convicts her and she gets the stiffest sentence, 144 months, because she went to trial, right? She didn't take a guilty plea. So the jury is made up of individuals. They're not necessarily the smartest people in the world, and they can be manipulated by a judge. The state wants you to take a plea. If you don't take a plea, then the judges who have absolute immunity can steer a jury. They can manipulate jurors based on faulty, crooked jury instructions. So just bear that in mind. Now I'm going to try and unpack what happened in the case of Oluyemisi Okedokun. So that they had this series of healthcare agencies, right? That in which they were prosecuted and found guilty of defrauding the government through Medicare payments amounting to about $21 million and billing for patients who didn't exist, patients who they didn't provide services to, or patients who were dead, or patients who didn't need these services at all. So Medicare and Medicaid scam is pervasive in America. Now, if whites do it and they get away with it, because in my case, like I said, there's a judge involved in a Medicaid scam, right? The judge who was superintending over my case, the wrongful intent to frighten assault on the police who had no arrest warrant, who came to my home on a fabricated emergency evaluation petition. So they have the idea was the police came to my house claiming an uncle they cooked up, that they concocted, wanted them to take me to the hospital. So that's a civil case. And how a civil case turns into a criminal case, it's astonishing. And now I'm going to just pivot back to Oluyemisi Okedokun's case. Oluyemisi Okedokun's case is very complex because apparently she and her husband also had a real estate investment company called Triplegate Investments. And there was this particular property that was in contention. In 2016, they missed a mortgage payment. They defaulted on a mortgage payment on a $3.5 million property, right, which they owned through this company, Triple Investments. So there was a foreclosure attorney who got involved. His name's Todd Prince. He's a white guy, crooked guy. He's in prison now. And this guy was doing all sorts of fraudulent, shady stuff. And so she immediately filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy, right? Bankruptcy, saying she's bankrupt. By the way, we don't have debtor's jail in America. So owing money is not a crime in America. You don't go to jail. It damages your credit. That's just what it does, right? It damages your credit. That can damage your reputation because you can't get loans, or it can affect your employment. But owing money is not a crime. So this is a civil matter, right? That's how it starts for her. This was 2016. So they defaulted on a mortgage payment, she and her husband, on this property. And an attorney called Todd Prince tried to put the property into foreclosure, but Oluyemisi Okedoku immediately preempted that by filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So automatically, the foreclosure should have stopped. It should have prevented any foreclosure. But there was this crooked attorney who was involved, Todd Prince. He goes ahead and continues with the foreclosure proceedings and sells it. Now, this attorney, right, he's been disbarred, he's in prison now. He fabricates judges' orders, fabricates motions, court proceedings, and judges' orders, signatures. He forges them that, a judge ordered this, makes forgeries. And in any event, he sells this property that belonged to Triplegate Investments, that was owned by Oluyemisi Okedoku and her husband, Felix Amos. But again, as Oluyemisi, she did some very strategic moves, right? When she files the Chapter 7 foreclosure proceedings, right, to stop the foreclosure sale, she then she has the company, Triple Investment, convey ownership of the property to her personally, Oluyemisi Okedoku. Triple Investments, of course, is another entity. It's a person on its own under the law. It's a different entity. So even though she was the principal, her and her husband were the owners, but Triple Investments is an entity. But so she now had that property now conveyed to her personally. Now this was charged as being fraudulent. There was a fraudulent conveyance, transfer. But in any event, this guy, the attorney Todd Prince, goes to He sells that property, $3.5 million, in a foreclosure sale to an investment company that specializes in buying foreclosed properties at cheap prices, right? And then sells it off at a profit. So Elba Investments comes in. So Elba Investments buys this foreclosed property, this property that shouldn't have been foreclosed because Oluyemisi Okedoko had already filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. It stops the foreclosure sale. But Todd Prince fabricates judges' signatures, who fabricates judges' signatures, fabricates proceedings, goes ahead and sells it to Elba Investments, who buys it for $2.4 million. Now, the $2.4 million is paid. There's supposed to be an account, a trustee account, but the attorney, Todd Prince, embezzles that $2.4 million and uses it for his own personal benefit. Now, Todd Prince, he has a wife, he has a lavish lifestyle. He was using that money, $2.4 million, to travel because he also knew, he figured that, look, since this thing is now in foreclosure, right, it's in bankruptcy proceeding, right, Oluyemisi had filed a bankruptcy proceeding, it would have a long legal process. So he decides to use the money for himself and his family. Now, ironically, Todd Prince's wife is not in jail. She's not arrested. They didn't take her, they didn't lock her up. Todd Prince is a white guy. His wife wasn't locked up, wasn't arrested, wasn't charged for benefiting from the proceedings of embezzled money. Now, Oluyemisi Okedoko, her husband was a principal, was an architect of this these financial schemes, right? She doesn't know. Maybe her husband's just directing her on whatever. Do this, do that, do this. You know, her husband's over 30 years older than her, right? And unfortunately, she got more time than her husband. Her husband got just 30 months. She got 72 months. Their office manager, their worker who just writes the checks, right? Because she had a Range Rover. You know, the prosecutor is saying, well, because she bought a Range Rover, she has her own business on the side and things like that. Well, she benefited. Look, she's paid for her work. However Americans or people spend their money, it's nobody's business. That's their prerogative. And so you have to be careful that this is what racists, the people who are racist in America, they're targeting, they're looking at successful Nigerians, what they own, and you just notice the narrative, right? Notice the narrative that, well, they spend money on this, they do all of this. They're people who, this country has a history of hating black people. Now, Nigerians are coming here and they're successful and showing that they're smart. That those, not all white people, not all Americans hate Nigerians or hate black people. But you have to understand that there's that element. This nation's always been half-half. And when you go to places like Texas, you're in places like Maryland, you have racist cops, you have racist crooked judges, you have racist crooked prosecutors, and you have the jury is made up of a community that's equally racist, right? They're married to the crooked cops, the crooked attorneys, the crooked judges, right? And these judges, crooked judges, can manipulate them. So take what you see in the American media with a grain of salt, even if it's coming from the US government, right? Remember, the President of the United States, he was convicted of 34 felonies in New York. But that jury in New York doesn't like, everybody knows, even though he came from New York, he was born in New York, New Yorkers don't, the common man in New York doesn't like Donald Trump. So they convicted him. They don't like Donald Trump. The jury is made of people, so people who don't like you, they're going to convict you, right? So take it with a grain of salt, right? And that's why I pay attention, please, to these discussions I'm having on the history of America, on what's going on the complex litigation. Again, this is not legal advice, but pay attention because you have families here in America and they might not be safe, right? This country has a history of virulent, very violent racism, right? Now they're using the courts to lynch black people, especially Nigerians, successful Nigerians, immigrants, right? If people do the crime, they should pay the time, but they have the due process. They shouldn't fabricate charges against them. They shouldn't fabricate evidence against them. They shouldn't violate their due process. Let's see a transparent due process. Let the integrity of the system be maintained. I'm going to continue with my discussion on the complex litigation issue concerning Oluyemisi Okedoku, who is on the that list, unfortunately, of the worst people in America who are being deported by the scheduled to be deported by the Department of Homeland Security. My name is Oluroti Milsha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.